Have you ever noticed that no matter where you go, you are always in conversation? Not with others, but with yourself. A quiet voice, sometimes gentle, sometimes cruel. It speaks when you wake up. It follows you through the day. And at night, when the world finally goes silent, it becomes louder. And the strange thing is, you believe it. You believe the voice that tells you you're not enough. You believe the voice that replays your past mistakes. You believe the voice that whispers, this is who you are, this is all you'll ever be. But what if I told you something unsettling? That voice is not the truth, it's a habit. A pattern you've been repeating for years, built from pain, from rejection, from moments when you felt small, unseen, forgotten. And over time, that voice didn't just describe your reality, it started creating it. Because the way you speak to yourself becomes the way you experience your life. Think about it. If every day you tell yourself you're broken, how could you ever feel whole? If every mistake becomes proof of your failure, how could you ever grow? No one teaches you this. No one tells you that the most important conversation of your life is the one happening inside your own mind. And that conversation is shaping everything, your choices, your relationships, your courage, your fears. So let me ask you something. If your inner voice has the power to build your life, why has it been destroying it? Here's the part nobody likes to face. The voice in your head isn't entirely yours. It's an echo of your parents, your teachers, your past relationships. Moments when someone looked at you and said directly or indirectly you are not enough, and you absorbed it because you were young, because you were vulnerable, because you didn't know how to question it. So you turned those voices into your own. And now, years later, you wake up every day carrying judgments that were never truly yours to begin with. That's why your inner voice can feel so harsh, so unforgiving, so absolute. It doesn't negotiate, it doesn't comfort, it doesn't understand your pain. It simply repeats what it has learned, over and over again. But here's where it gets darker. Part of you believes you deserve it, because somewhere deep inside, you accepted the idea that you must criticize yourself to improve. That kindness is weakness, that compassion will make you lazy, that if you're not hard on yourself, you'll fall apart. So you punish yourself with thoughts, with words, with silence, and slowly, without even realizing it, you become both the prisoner and the one holding the key. But what if that belief is wrong? What if the voice that breaks you is not the one that will ever heal you? There is another voice inside you, quieter, deeper, almost hidden beneath the noise. But it doesn't speak in judgment, it speaks in truth. This is the part of you that feels everything you try to ignore. The part that holds your anger, your fear, your loneliness, your hidden desires. This is your shadow. And most of your life you've been taught to reject it, to push it away, to hide it, to pretend it doesn't exist, because it's uncomfortable, because it's messy, because it reveals parts of you that don't fit the image you want the world to see. But here's the paradox. The more you reject your shadow, the more power it gains over you. It starts leaking out in your reactions, in your relationships, in your self-talk. You snap at people and don't know why. You sabotage opportunities that matter to you. You feel an emptiness even when everything seems fine, because your shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been unheard for too long. And your inner voice, it often becomes the battlefield between who you pretend to be and who you truly are. So instead of listening, you silence it. But silence does not heal. It only buries the truth deeper. And buried truth always finds a way to return. So what would happen if instead of fighting your shadow, you started listening to it? Words are not just sounds, they are instructions. Every time you speak to yourself, you are programming your mind. When you say, I can't do this, your mind stops trying. When you say, I always fail, your mind starts looking for proof. But when you change the way you speak, something shifts, not instantly, not magically, but slowly, deeply, powerfully. Imagine this. Instead of saying, I'm not good enough, you say, I'm learning. Instead of, I'm broken, you say, I've been hurt, but I'm still here. Instead of, why am I like this, you ask, what am I trying to protect? Do you feel the difference? One voice attacks, the other understands. And understanding changes everything. Because when you begin to speak to yourself with awareness, you stop reacting from pain. You start responding with clarity. You become less afraid of your thoughts because you are no longer at war with them. But here's the truth most people avoid. Changing your inner voice is not easy because that old voice feels familiar. And familiarity feels safe even when it's hurting you. so you go back to it again and again, even when you know better. So the question becomes, are you willing to let go of the voice that feels like home, even if it has been quietly destroying you? There is a strange fear that lives inside many people, the fear of being kind to themselves. It sounds absurd, but it's real, because deep down you believe that if you stop being hard on yourself, you will lose control, that without pressure you won't grow, that without criticism you'll become weak. So you hold on to that harsh voice, like it's the only thing keeping you together. But look at your life. Has it really helped you? Or has it only made you tired, anxious, and disconnected from who you truly are? Kindness is not weakness, it is clarity. It allows you to see yourself without distortion, to recognize your flaws without turning them into your identity. When you speak to yourself with kindness, you don't ignore your mistakes, you understand them. And understanding leads to change, not fear, not shame, but real transformation. Because the truth is, you don't grow by hating yourself into a better version. You grow by understanding why you are the way you are and choosing something different. And that choice begins with a single moment, a moment where you pause, hear that harsh voice, and decide not to follow it. But what happens when that voice refuses to go quiet? Section 6. Rewriting the voice within you. Can't silence your inner voice overnight, and you shouldn't try to, because that voice, even in its harshness, is trying to protect you. It learned to criticize you so others wouldn't have to. It learned to expect failure so you wouldn't be disappointed. It learned to control you so you wouldn't lose yourself. But protection can become a prison. So instead of fighting it, you begin to change your relationship with it. You listen, not to obey, but to understand. When it says you're not good enough, you ask, why do I feel this way? When it says you'll fail, you respond, maybe, but I'll learn. You don't argue with aggression. You respond with awareness, and slowly something changes. That voice softens, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it fear. You replace judgment with curiosity, criticism with reflection, hate with patience. And over time, a new voice begins to emerge, not louder, but stronger. A voice that doesn't break you, but builds you. A voice that doesn't deny your darkness, but integrates it. And this is where real transformation begins. Not in changing who you are, but in changing how you relate to yourself. But here's the final question. What kind of life becomes possible when your inner voice is no longer your enemy? When you change the way you speak to yourself, you change the way you live. You take risks, not because you're fearless, but because you're no longer paralyzed by your own thoughts. You form deeper connections because you're not constantly questioning your worth. You face your past without being consumed by it. And slowly, quietly, you begin to feel something unfamiliar. Peace. Not because your life is perfect, not because your problems disappeared, but because the war inside you has ended. You no longer wake up fighting yourself. You no longer go to sleep carrying the weight of your own judgment. You become someone who can sit with their thoughts without being destroyed by them. And that changes everything, because the world outside you will always be unpredictable. People will disappoint you. Life will challenge you. Pain will still exist. But when your inner voice becomes a place of safety, you are no longer afraid of any of it. You become resilient. Not because you're unbreakable, but because you know how to rebuild. And in that quiet strength, you discover something most people never do. You were never broken. You were just speaking to yourself in a way that made you believe you were. Maybe the voice inside your head is not your enemy. Maybe it's a wounded part of you asking to be heard. And maybe the way you've been speaking to yourself was never the truth, just a story shaped by pain, repeated so many times that it began to feel real. But stories can change, and the moment you begin to speak to yourself differently, you begin to live differently, not instantly, not perfectly, but deeply. Because healing does not begin when your life changes. It begins the moment your voice does. So tonight, when everything is quiet and that familiar voice begins to speak, pause, listen, and ask yourself, is this the voice that will keep me trapped, or the one that will finally set me free?